Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit about our Hatch and Bentley design review journey. My name is Greg Kurpiel. I've been at Hatch for 13 years. I am a software engineer, and today I am also one of the dev leads on our digital DPD initiative, or digital project delivery initiative. Myself personally, I've been helping over these 13 years to deliver many projects at Hatch from a tools/digital perspective. Today, I also have with me John DiMatteo, who is one of our lead developer on the design review application integration with our Hatch tools. So today, what John and I would like to present, basically the idea is that we give you two kind of business requirements, and then John will go over how we implemented them. So requirement number one was actually it seemed simple enough, but basically the idea is here to embed design review inside of an iframe inside of our portal. So I'll hand it over to John now, and I'll let him discuss on how it was implemented.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is John DiMatteo. I'm a software developer at Hatch, and I work closely with Bentley Systems to develop a 3D modeling application that's kind of built around design review. We had tried to make our own iModel.js application in the past, but our users wanted to use design review as well. So that's why we came up with this solution. Design review has a lot of great features that would be hard to replicate on our own, such as version compare, where you can compare the changes between different iModel versions, and issue resolution, where you can create and view different issues that are tracked in the model. So I'm going to walk us through how we built around design review, how we built this application. Yeah, we aren't just embedding it in an iframe, but we're actually sending data to design review and getting data back out through the iframe. We're using an API provided to us by Bentley, which sends and receives messages to the iframe through post messages. So here's an example of the API and the application in action. So I'll just show one of our features here, the search feature. So through this feature, I can search for a tag. A tag is a unique alphanumeric identifier. It's often seen on engineering projects and on PNIDs to identify engineering objects such as pumps, tanks, fans, pipes, etc. So if I go to the search bar here and I type in a tag, so I know that one tag is 546 pp-001, so that's a tag for a pump. And if I hit the search, we can see that it's going to select the pump, zoom in and highlight to the pump, just like that. And it's also going to search some metadata around that tag, right? Some engineering data, and some documents related to the pump, right, to the tag, such as operating manuals and procedures and stuff like that. So how did we do it, right? How did we get this external application to actually talk to and send data, into design review? We're taking this tag here and we are converting it to an element ID. Then we're sending that element ID, which design review understands, to design review so that it can zoom in and highlight the pump. So I will go through an example of how to do this. I'm going to use the DevTools console. But first, let's just take a look at the code. So this code is a part of the package, the npm package provided to us by Bentley for that API. So I wanted to show this because I want to see, all the different events and data available to us. It's not just, select and highlight a pump. So for example, let's go look at this enum iframe commands. So these are all the post event messages that can be sent to design review, and they're going to perform an action, right? So for example, we can use the iModel query. So we can actually query that iModel. We could say, select all elements that are a part of this pump, or stuff like that. We can select elements, which is what we've seen. We can get the information on certain elements, right? Because in the iModel itself, there's some data usually surrounding that element from the design tools. We can zoom, we can emphasize, which is like highlighting. We can change the color for certain elements, which is an interesting one because then we can show certain statuses and certain properties by color. Emphasize and zoom, clear, these are kind of self-explanatory. We can also show a section range. So this will actually show like a 3D volume in the iModel. And notice how we can only show a volume, right? So this API does a lot, but there are some limitations. And you'll see later how we used extensions, iModel.js extensions, to overcome this limitation, right? Because we wanted to actually be able to edit the volume and not just show it. And then going up here to the iframe parent events. So these are some post-event messages that are sent from design review, right? And they're going to be handled by the embedding app, right? So our external application. So for example, the iModel query result, if you send it a query, a request for a query, it'll send the result back to you. So you have to be listening for that. Every time user selection in the iModel changes, we're listening for those events. iModel props, right? We're getting the data back around a certain element. And yeah, some other ones as well. So now that I've shown that, here's kind of what it looks like. I'll show some code of what it looks like for the embedded application to actually use this API, right? So at the end of the day, it's an NPM package. And this is just a service that I wrote for our application. And I just wanted to show how easy it was, to use it. So you would install the NPM package. I wrote a little wrapper around it, and then you just call zoom elements and you pass it the IDs. And this will send the message through the iframe to actually zoom in to those IDs, right? If we take a look at the design review service, it's taking this design review API service, which you can see is just it's just a service that I wrote. So yeah, now I wanted to show a little demo, and I want to essentially replicate this functionality, right? This where we're given it a tag, we're going to convert it to an element ID, which design review understands, and then we're going to have design review select this pump and highlight it in the model to kind of show how the API works, at a very granular level. So let me just zoom out here, and I'll unselect the pump. And at the end of the demo, hopefully it'll select the pump and zoom in. All right, so open up DevTools now. Okay, so first I'm going to write a function called receive message. So this is going to be listening, right, for those iframe parent events that we saw in the API, right? So we can go, if the event dot data dot type is equal to iModel query result. So we're going to be listening for the result of a query, so we're going to want to send it a query. So if that, then we're going to want to console log the response, just so we can actually see it on the screen, the response from the iModel, from design review. Okay, so that looks good. So we'll just hit enter. Okay, now let's actually have an event listener to call that function, right? Because we just wrote a function, we're not actually listening to anything right now. So let's add event listener. We're going to listen for messages, and we're going to call the function when we get something. Okay, so now we're actually listening for those iModel query results events. So now let's actually send it a query. So if I go document dot query selector, so I'm going to find the iframe that holds designer view, right? Right now we're on this site, right? Our Hatchbeam Dev SharePoint site, which embeds designer view. So we need to find the iframe on that site, right? So that we actually send messages into it. So luckily I wrote a tag around it so we can easily identify it. It's just called embedded design review. So this is the div holding the iframe. So if we get the first element child, then this will give us the iframe. And you can see here it is. So I'll just hit enter so we can see it. So this is the iframe, right? Holding designer view. Okay, so we got the iframe. Now let's send in a message. So let's get the window here and let's go post message. So where do we want to send it? So we're going to send it a type iModel query. And remember that the API that was provided to us, we don't have to actually define these types, right? They're already defined for us in these events, right? But because we're doing it from the console, from the DevTools, we have to actually write out the strings ourselves, right? So now let's give it a payload. So the payload, I believe, is defined as just an object with this EC-SQL property. So EC-SQL. So we're going to write an EC-SQL query in here so that we can get a response back. So EC-SQL is a text-based command language for create, read, update, delete operations against the business data in an iModel, right? So it's essentially it's an implementation of SQL, right? It's a subset of SQL. So if you know SQL, you essentially know EC-SQL, right? So it'll look very familiar. So let's do something simple here. So let's just say select, all from biz.element. So biz.element is part of the biz schema that defines an iModel, where user label equals, and right in here, I'm gonna put the tag, right? The tag that we have. So in our application, we identify things through their tags. That's why we would have this in our application. But in designer view, they identify things through the element ID. So that's the goal here, right? We want to get the element ID so that then I can tell designer view to select that element ID. Okay, so hitting enter. Oh, right, of course. This did not work because I forgot to give it the URL, the target origin, which of course is important. Otherwise, designer view will be listening for all events, right, from everyone, but we need to actually give it a target. Okay, now I'll hit enter. And there's our response back. Okay, so we got this array back to us, and you can see that there's some data in here, right? It has this class name, so there's this horizontal vessel from OpenPlant 3D, and most importantly, it has this ID, right? So this ID corresponds to that pump, right? With the user label 546PP001. So this is the ID that we want. So if I say make a new variable, maybe ID equals, and we pass in this new value. Now I'm going to send another message to designer view, and I want it to actually select this value, right? And then we should look back and we should see it selected over here. So if we do the same thing, right, we have a document dot query selector I'll just copy that. Content window. Okay, post message. So we're going to send another message. This time we're going to want to send a select command. So the type is select elements. Okay, the payload this time is our IDs, or well, just ID because there's only one. And again, don't forget the target origin, which is right here. Okay, so hitting enter. So now we should go back and we should see it selected, and there we go. So it was just selected. So I'll emphasize it so you can see it more clearly. And there it is. So there's our pump. All right, so that's pretty much it for the demo. We can see how the API works at a very granular level. Through the console, we were able to convert that tag, right? We're actually able to query the iModel to convert that tag to an element ID, and then we were able to select that pump in design review, right, from an external application. In this case, from DevTools, but you can imagine it can be any external application. So thank you very much. I'll send it back over to Greg.
Okay, so business case number 2. So now that we've got the application embedded, now the business came to us and said, okay, we would like our packaging to be done in the design review application. So we said, okay, what would you like to do? So they sent us a very variety of different scenarios. Was, you know, selecting an element to add it to a package, selecting a group of elements, and then volumes came about. So the idea here is that they can create volumes, and then whatever appears in that volume should then appear in a list, and they'd be able to select them and deselect them and so on and so forth. So we quickly got to work, and we could create volumes very simply. As you know, the design review provides you volume creation tools, and we could communicate, get the elements out, and so on and so forth. But then they also asked us, well, now that we can create the volumes, now we need to edit the volumes because we don't always create the correct volumes. So okay, we said okay, and we went out and figured out, okay, once we have a volume created, how are we going to edit this volume? How are we going to bring back the extenders, the arrows that allow you to basically redraw the volume? So we went back and forth, and we with Bentley developers, and we had discussions, and we came to the conclusion that the best way to do this was to create an extension and deploy it inside of design review, because that would then allow us for the proper communication to take place. So now I will hand it over to John, and he will show you some of the code that we wrote around the extensions.
Thanks again, Greg. So yeah, an iModel.js extension is basically just some compiled JavaScript code that is loaded into and run in design review at runtime. And this way you can extend or add to the functionality of design review, or any iModel.js front-end application actually, but for our use case, we've been focusing on design review. And the biggest advantage of this is being able to actually use the iModel.js front-end libraries, and you're able to interact with the interface in the iModel at a much deeper level than using the previous API I just showed you. So for more information about extensions, you can go to the iModel.js website and search for extensions, and there'll be some information and some examples there. But I want to show you my own example, just to show you how easy it was to make an extension. So this is the code here for the extension that we're talking about. So it's pretty small, right? It's only 41 lines. The main part of it, right? With some additional functionality, that's only 76 lines. But all you need to do is extend this extension class coming from the iModel.js frontend library. And once you extend this class, you need to implement two methods: this onLoad method and this onExecute. So onLoad is invoked the first time the extension is loaded, and the onExecute is invoked every time the extension is loaded. So depending on your use case, you need to actually implement and fill out a one or both of these functions. So for our use case in the onLoad function, we have some functionality here. And as well with extending this class and doing these two functions, you also need to use the iModel app and the extension admin to register your extension. This is perhaps the most important part. You can't forget about this. You just need to give your extension a name and then register it with the iModel app. But yeah, once you've done this, then you can implement your custom functionality. In our case, right, we want to be able to show a volume on demand, and then be able to edit that volume whenever the user wants to, right? So yeah, like I said, the biggest advantage with these extensions is being able to use the iModel.js libraries, right? And any iModel.js developer knows that showing a volume and editing it is a pretty trivial task using the iModel.js libraries. So I can show you here. We have a listener that's listening to commands from our application. It receives a payload, which is really just a set of X, Y, Z coordinates, low and high. We can turn that into a range 3D object, which is a part of the iModel.js libraries. And then if we go into our draw function, we can grab the viewport from the iModel app, and then we can use the view clip tool here to show the volume, right? So that's all it takes to show the volume there. The view clip tool enable the volume, do the clip to the range since we have a range. So now we have a volume that's showing, and using the view clip decoration provider, we can show those arrows, right? Those handles, which allow you to edit the volume. And that's all it takes. So this view clip decoration provider and the view clip tool, right? These are all just coming from the iModel.js libraries, the iModel.js frontend. So yeah, it's very, very easy. Once you're done writing the functionality, all you got to do is compile it, right? npm run build. This will compile this TypeScript code into a nice JavaScript module, which can then be published into Design Review using the extension CLI. And I'll show that just in a minute. So, okay, we've built it. So we have this extension folder that's ready to be deployed. And we can now open up the CLI. All right, so using the CLI now, we can publish our extension to Design Review. And there are several options here. So we want to publish, right? And you can also delete extensions and view them. -n, we want to give it a name here. This name should match the name that we gave it when we registered it using the extension admin. So our name is Silent Draw Tool. We give it a version number, so let's give it a version number of 1.0.8, and then the path to that compiled extension folder, right, that we built with npm run build. So this will publish it to my account here, because you have to sign in organization-wide, but you can also publish it just to a project if you'd like, or even just to a user. But showing this in action now, so I'm going to hit enter. It will sign in, but since I'm already signed in, nothing will pop up. Okay, so it packages it up, and now it's uploading it, and that's it. So now our extension is published. So now to actually use the extension, in the same embed API that I showed previously, you just have to initialize it when you load the app. But that's just a one-liner. That's pretty easy, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how to write. That's how we wrote our first iModel.js extension. And yeah, I'll send it back over to Greg. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, John, for showing us through the code. And that now concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Myself and John will now be available for any questions you may have regarding the business cases or the code. So please feel free to ask. Thanks. Bye.